There are major global shifts that are happening in the world, and today's video I'm going to share with you what these three major shifts are and how to navigate. If you are a business owner or property owner, buyer or investor, you might have already felt what's happening globally, such as trade wars, tariffs, wars in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, the volatility of inflation and increased interest rates. Before we jump in and talk about the major shifts and how to navigate, I have a couple of disclaimers. The first one is I'm not providing tailored, specific, individual advice to anyone. I am providing educational information which may give you some insights and perspectives, which means you need to talk to someone who's local, because the perspectives I'm going to give you, they are global in nature. And in commercial real estate and business sales, the local market is equally important, and therefore talk to professionals like myself in your local market. Let's start first with the major shift that's happening, which is the volatility of inflation. When inflation happens, countries respond by taming inflation, and there are some measures they take. One of the measures they take, which has a lot of consequences, is increasing the interest rate. They do that because there are out there a lot of demands but less supply. There are a lot of money out there but not enough goods. To do that, they increase the interest rate, which means debt or getting money or capital becomes very, very expensive. When that happens, buyers become very hesitant. There are also a lot of impacts on buyers and sellers. When interest rate is high, if you have loan, your cash flow going to be eaten by the payment that you have to make to your loan, which means your property or your business has less cash flow, which impacts the valuation of your business or property. In most cases, buyers and investors respond to that. They want high cap rate, which basically forces you to reduce the valuation of your business or property. What we see globally right now is that sellers, they're not going for this. They're not reducing the valuation of their business or properties. There are some reasons why. For example, if I have a business or property, and if I have debt, and the interest rate was very low when I got that loan, now if I sell my property or my business, what happens? In most cases, those people who have commercial real estate and businesses, they don't just sell and go and retire on beaches like this one. In most cases, they buy another business or another property. In that case, if they had a very low interest rate, now when they sell and try to buy a new property or business, what happens? Interest rate is very, very high, and they don't want to do that. That's why they don't want to sell. They don't want to reduce the valuation and sell it. And therefore, here are a couple of things you could do. If you are a buyer, look for fixed rate interest rates. Look for seller financing. If you are a seller and if you have the ability, you can offer seller financing and give them better interest rate than the bank to sell your property or business. Let's talk about the second one, which is geopolitical tensions, trade war, especially between the United States and China, and the wars that are going on in the Middle East and also in the Eastern Europe. All of these impacts what? The supply chain. And when there are geopolitical tensions, tariffs, trade wars, The best approach would be to have businesses that have domestic supply chain. And therefore, if you are a property owner or business owner, how can you make a shift from having properties such as, for example, office? Why not convert that into industrial or warehouse? Whatever you have to do to make sure that you are aligning with what's gonna happen, because those companies that are producing, manufacturing locally, and those who have domestic supply chain are gonna be more profitable and more effective. And you wanna adjust whether you have a property or business. For example, if you have a business, in this kind of situations, the best approach would be you making sure that you have domestic supply chain. You can start to find domestic supply chain. If you have a property, for example, why don't you use free spaces to create warehouses, stuff like that, so that you are adjusting with the shift that's happening. The third one is the behaviors of consumers and users are changing, especially after COVID, which means the workplace behavior has changed. And a lot of organizations are allowing their people to be hybrid, which impacts office properties. However, there are office types, office properties that are A-type, very strategic places that are still in need. And also there are property owners who are making shift. For example, they convert their offices into residential or retail and so on. Those who have strip malls, for example, understanding the behavioral changes that are happening, they are bringing wellness businesses into their strip mall. And those owners who have more free spaces, they are increasing more amenities and utilities to make sure that their properties are still very adjusted to what's happening in the behaviors of consumers and users. That said, one of the things that you could do right now in this kind of environment is to make sure that your property is having additional amenities, to have more utilities, to adjust, use your free spaces, convert your property into something that's evergreen. In conclusion, there are three major shifts that are happening in the world, and you want to adjust and you want to navigate through these shifts. The first one we talked about was the volatility of inflation and the increasing of interest rate, which impacts the cost of capital, which impacts getting loans. And we talked about how to mitigate that. The second thing we talked about is the geopolitical tensions, trade wars in the Middle East and also in Eastern Europe, and the geopolitical tensions, and how those companies that make a shift in focusing more on domestic supply chain will be very successful, because if your supply chain is global, it's gonna be disrupted. Also, properties that adjust to this shift by turning their properties into industrial and building properties next to hubs, airports, and so on, could be able to succeed. The third thing we talked about is the user and workplace behavioral change. With those changes, those business owners and property owners who adjust to the new shift in behaviors could be able to stay forever green and become very valuable. Before I finish this video, if you are local in Tampa and in the surrounding areas, and if you would like to have strategic conversation about your property or your business, please reach out, and I would love to have the conversation with you. I would love to brainstorm with you. I hope this helped you. Good day. I'm gonna switch the camera and I want to show you beautiful sunset, sunrise, and the beach and ocean. Beautiful. All right, have a